When you talk about transport of marine debris, what do you mean there?
I think we're looking at how it kind of moves within the gyres and the ocean's ecosystems, and if it is sinking or floating more over time, like we were talking about, where in the water column it's going to be most likely to be found, and where, depending on where it originates from, on land or in the water, where it's going to go, to help us predict where maybe stronger efforts could be needed.
Potential impact of climate change relative to that certainly impacts the transport in perhaps other areas as well. Can you comment on that?
Sure, definitely. So there haven't really been many scientific papers on marine debris and climate change, and the ones that are out now are looking a little bit more specifically at the increased frequency of storms, and how that might affect marine debris. But we can make a couple of predictions, right? So changing wind and weather conditions will affect our ability to predict where plastics will accumulate in the marine environment, which will make it more difficult for us to assess the species that are most impacted, because if we don't know where it's going, we don't know who lives there and who's going to be impacted the most. The other thing to think about is precipitation, right? So when it rains, especially in big city centers, a lot of debris that's on the streets is kind of flushed out into the nearest water body. And with changing weather, it will rain more in some areas and rain less in some. So that's going to change the rate at which some of this debris is getting out into the marine ecosystems. Another thing to think about is polar ice caps melting. As the polar ice melts, it's going to make the ocean less salty, which will make it less dense and might make it easy for the plastics or other marine debris to sink more readily, which again will make it harder for us to find where it is and who it's affecting. And of course, we're looking at severe storms, how they're becoming more frequent and how they're causing more debris to go into the water as well. So I think right now we're still working to understand the effects of plastics on one individual. And then once we understand that, we can maybe understand how it's affecting a community of individuals or a population, and then their habitat as well, and if it's affecting where they're feeding and where they're living. And I think the two main areas of concern are ingestion, so the physical presence of plastic particles in the animal's body, and also the contaminants that stick to those plastics, and whether or not those chemical additives are affecting the health of the animal or the ecosystem in which that animal lives. So we don't know a lot right now about the differences of impacts between one plastic polymer and the next. There's lots of types of plastics. And we don't know how those different types may affect different animals or different ecosystems differently. So the questions are of course endless, and it's going to take a lot more research to get those sort of answers that we need. So the recycling situation is a bit complicated. I'm sure most people have heard in the news that our recycling is usually pretty contaminated, which makes it very difficult to process properly. So I think a lot of people think that they're doing the right thing and they're kind of wish cycling. And if you don't know if something is recyclable or not, your temptation is just throw it in the bin, because if it's recyclable, they'll recycle it. But what you could be doing is contaminating everything in your bin if you put something that's not recyclable in there. So the best thing to do for recycling efficiently is know for sure the things in your specific county that can be recycled properly, and only recycle those. Anything else has to be put in a separate bin, just to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And that's one of the challenges. It's different county by county, municipality by municipality. The rules vary. So make sure you check your specific county's website or your town's website to make sure that you're recycling the things that can be recycled. And I think you're absolutely right. It comes down more to refusing our use of single-use plastics and trying to eliminate those things from your life, which I know can sound very overwhelming. If you think about all of the single-use plastic things that you touch in a day, it's actually incredible. And it's not always the consumer's fault. I think sometimes there's not a lot of alternatives. Like, I know when I go grocery shopping, there's loads of things that come home with me in plastic clamshell containers, like berries or spinach or anything else. So it's difficult to do, and it can be overwhelming to think about all at once. So my advice to people who are just learning about this and maybe want to do a little bit more is to take a very small step. Think of one single-use item that you use every day and try to find an alternative and just see if that works out for your life. For me, I'll give an example. We just learned a couple of weeks ago that our tea bags have microfibers. Most tea bags are made with plastic microfiber particles if the bag is not completely 100% organic and natural, which mine are not. And the marine debris team got all over me because I drink 1,000 cups of tea a day. So I am trying very hard to switch to loose leaf tea that you steep in a strainer and then compost the leaves after, and it's zero waste. So I think small adjustments like that, just getting used to them kind of one at a time in your life and seeing if it works for you. And then if it does, do something else. And eventually you'll reduce the footprint of waste that you're producing by a lot, because what it's going to come down to is individual action and the demand for those single-use plastic products decreasing, especially for those of us who have the opportunity to do that and do it safely. So I think one small step, anything you can do, think about paper towels or your napkin or your lunch bag or a plastic baggie that you bring your sandwich in. All of those can be switched. It's an easy switch. Just try to do it. And if that works, do something else.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And that's really the root cause of marine debris. You know, you've got the fishing gear and all of that as well, but from consumers, this is a big part of it. If it's not disposed of properly, but also single-use plastic, the prevalence of it. I think you have some resources on your website too, don't you?
Yeah, we do. You can always check it out, or you can always email me, and we'd be happy to chat about it. One of the projects I'm really proud of that we're working on now is a zero waste initiative for NOAA, to make sure that we're doing the right things at home and that our meetings are as waste-free as they can be, and that we don't use any single-use plastics in any gatherings that we hold. And the workshop I was mentioning for the action plan last April, we had all reusable utensils and no single-use containers for anything, no individual packets of ketchup or anything like that. So it's a project for all of us. It definitely takes work and thought, but we can do it. And once you get used to it, it's not that hard.
Thanks for watching. For more information, visit our website at www.futurefrogmen.org.